Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. My name is Carrie Damon. I'm Director of Entrepreneurship Education here at Mars. So tonight I have a number of announcements to start with. The first is that we're trying something new this year. We've been listening to you and your feedback over the last couple years, and our audience has been really changing from primarily a B2B or business-to-business audience that needs business-to-business sales to business-to-consumer. So we're going to try something different because sales is very different depending on who you're selling to. So as every topic in Entrepreneurship 101 is, it's really hard to get everything in 1 hour, but we're going to try to do 2 topics in an hour and a half. So it's a major challenge this week. I have a couple announcements to start with. I'm going to get your name wrong. I know it. Pratiksha? Where are you standing? Oh, just standing over there. She's organizing networking sessions after the lectures, and you're meeting at the bottom of the escalators. So this has been going for a couple weeks, and we really thank you for helping us get entrepreneurs together after Entrepreneurship 101. Another announcement we have is we know the importance of sales is so important that we have limitations on what we can talk about in Entrepreneurship 101, but we've also scheduled a Mars Best Practices session on sales strategy. It's actually B2B sales strategy, and it will be March 22nd from noon to 1:30 in the Mars studio with Mark Elliott. And if you've been to the Best Practices sessions, you know they're really small groups. They're about 40 people can fit in the studio, and it's a longer time, so there's more time to ask questions and to get into a little deeper. So today we're hoping that our speakers can cover the fundamentals and we can get into some more depth in the best practices section. So tonight I have 2 speakers to introduce, and we haven't seen them since the beginning of the year when we did our ICE practice, Meet the Entrepreneurs and Lived It lecture. We've got Krista Jones, who's the practice lead and also an advisor in our information technology, communications, and entertainment practice, and Nathan Monk, who's a senior associate in the practice. And they are now located in the Mars Commons, which is a separate incubator for their clients and those in the space. A little bit about Krista's background. Krista has a unique combination of technical, operational, and marketing expertise in technology-based businesses. She's known for her comprehensive knowledge of existing and emerging ICE service infrastructure, as well as her ability to conceptualize. She ran the North American operations of Personetta, which was an Israeli VC-backed company. She's also an entrepreneur outside of her work here at Mars. And Nathan, who will be speaking after Krista, is a senior associate at Mars, as I've mentioned. He's a self-described digital cowboy and a strategic leader with nearly a decade of experience in digital marketing and business development initiatives, both at large corporations and more recently in an advisory capacity in the web and mobile technology startup community. Nathan has helped launch some of Canada's largest digital initiatives, including the On Media and the VC Capital event in New York City, CBC's 1 Million Acts of Green, which I'm sure lots of people have heard of, Yahoo Music Canada, Amex Canada's financial services site, and the CBC and the CanWest YouTube partnership. He's passionate about people and giving back to the community. He's ridden a bike from Toronto to Montreal to support the People with AIDS Foundation and is giving back through other grassroots startup community groups such as #StartupBookClub.to, which he runs here at Mars, which is monthly. Yeah. He also holds an MBA or HBA from the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario, graduating with distinction. So I think we're going to have Krista come up for about 25-30 minutes, and then we'll have Nathan come up for about the same time, and we'll do all questions at the very end, and we'll have them both come back. So we'll see how it goes. Welcome to Krista.
It is really beautiful out. I don't know if anybody else has, I spent the morning outside, so it was quite lovely. How many are in businesses that are doing business-to-business selling in the audience? Is everybody? Also quite a number. So it looks like about 50-50, Nathan. So we've always struggled with how to put the 2 B2B and B2C selling techniques together. So we're going to try it kind of as 2 sessions as one. We're really looking for your feedback afterwards and maybe figuring out a way to gel it a little bit closer together next year. One of the things that's really important for everybody to realize, it doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C, is you need to treat sales as a process. Sales is something that needs to be planned. It needs to be something that you actively wake up every morning and do, not something that just happens. And that's what's really important when you start to get into doing a startup. It's even more important in your early days that you actually have a process in terms of that you're tracking who you're selling to, what your targets are, whom you've spoken with. So really thinking of sales as a process is a very important first step. And the other thing that is really, really important that people tend to miss a lot is that sales actually requires special skills. So you might be the tech guy who has a great idea and has developed a great patent, and you're going out there to make the sale because there's only 2 of you in the business or there's 3 of you in the business. It's very likely that you'll get some energy because they'll love your passion and your idea, but you won't know how to actually ask for the deal, ask for the money. Because there is a logical progression to sales and there is skills required. The ability, the right to, when you've earned the right to ask them to make the deal, when you know when to stop wasting your time, when you know when somebody is just meeting with you for the sake of meeting with you, especially if it's a personal connection. So it's really important, not necessarily that you have to hire somebody new right away, but that you actually go out, read some books, and learn some of the skills that are required. Because it is something that is a very different process in terms of making sure that you're able to bring the deal to a close, sign the paperwork, protect yourself, protect your company, as well as the customer. You heard Debbie talk earlier about being able to create a win-win situation. Well, you need skills to be able to do this, and there are different skills. And so it's really important that you recognize that early on in your venture, that you're gonna need this. And then probably very quickly, probably not for your first couple of sales, but you're going to need to bring somebody in that has experience in it. How many people here have ever used been a salesperson or carried a bag? It's a bitch of a job. It's the one job you do where people say no to you more often than anything else. It's the only thing that you know for sure if you're a salesperson is that you're going to be told no at least once a day. If you're not, then you're not selling enough. And that's a really important lesson to be able to do. The next thing that's really important is to recognize what your business is, what is the product that you're selling, and what channel you need to do that with. There's really 5 different channels that you can look at depending on the complexity of the product that you're selling and the solution that it's solving for your customers. So if you've got a really complex CRM system that's going to impact multiple processes inside an organization, is in the price is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million sale for them. It's going to be a solution sale. It's going to be complicated. There's going to be multiple people involved at the organization. You're going to have a sales team. You're going to have to staff. It's going to take 3 to 6 months to be able to close that deal. But if you have a product that is simpler, and that can be sold and it solves a point solution in an organization, you could probably go to inside sales. And what that means is people who don't actually go out and meet with customers but work on the phone or through email or social media and actually reach out to customers that way. You know, if you go down to the bottom of this chart and you look at retail and online sales, that's really for when you're selling a simple product into small businesses or medium businesses. And sometimes the businesses will want you to talk to them. You can't afford it. If you look at the price of your product, you have to look at it from an affordability perspective. So this matrix is set up to help you figure out where you fit and be honest about this. Because if you're out there selling, and I've had lots of conversations with entrepreneurs who are doing direct sales, and I keep saying the product, you're selling it for $1,000. You know, how many of those and how many sales you need to make to actually be able to pay a salesperson to do that. So if that is where your product is sitting, you're going to need to find indirect channels, partners that you can sell through who maybe are already selling into that customer base. You need to get on social media. You need to use all of the online and indirect channels in terms of what you're trying to get to. Does that make sense? So those three things are the three really important grounding items in being able to do B2B sales. You have to remember that sales is a process that you have to manage. Just like software development is, just like accounting is, these things don't happen without management. Sales requires special skills, and sales requires very specific channels depending on the product that you're selling and the size of the company that you're selling to. So if you look at the indirect channels, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one because it's one of the ones I get the most questions on. So if you think of an indirect channels, there's all kinds of different channels or partners that you could partner with. And I have lots of people come and ask me, well, which one should I do? Really doesn't matter which one I think. It actually matters which one your customer is most likely to buy you through. So you have to think about this not from what is the best partner for you. If you're a technical guy, you might think, hey, I'm going to get some technical partners because I'm comfortable in that space. But that might not be at all where your customer is going looking for products that are like that. So you really have to think of this in line with, so, you know, if you think of small businesses, a lot of small businesses buy through industry associations. It's where they know they can get group discounts. They get different buying. So if your customers that you're reaching are of the size that will buy through that, then you need to go to marketing organizations. You know, there's different ones that you can do. Sometimes it's your product is part of a broader service, and customers are likely to have a service guy that's doing, you know, especially if it's in the communication space or something like that, somebody that's managing all of their IT for them, and that's where you need to go with your product. So it's really, really important to choose who the customer wants to buy from, as opposed to who you're comfortable with. And the last part on the indirect channel is, as a startup, you know, I get a lot of people who are trying to get the big channels. They want Cisco to front their product. They want Bell, or they want, big is not always best. You can't get attention. Because it's not good enough to just have the contract and to have your product listed. You actually have to have them want to sell it. You have to make sure that you get space on their, if it's an online sales channel, that you get, you know, space on the front page or on their, you know, above the fold. Or you have to make sure that you choose the one where you're going to get the most coverage. So it's a blend between size of channel partner and reach that they have, and exposure that you're going to get as you go into that channel. So those are the two things that, when you're thinking of channels, you really need to consider. Back to my original statement about sales being a process. One of the things that is really, really fundamental is a sales funnel. And it's one of those ones that, you know, every time I've had to do it in my career, I hated it. I hated every Monday morning having to put all my information into Salesforce or into some Excel spreadsheet that says who I called, who I was going to call, what likelihood I had, you know, whether it was 20% towards the closure of the sale or 100% towards the closure of the sale. But if you don't write it down, you can't manage it. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about how many of these you need to do to get a single sale as a company. And one of the things that you got to realize is that as you move companies through the process, somebody could show a lot of interest early on, really cool. They really love what it is. They say it's perfect for what they need to do. But that person still is only a 1 in 10 shot of closing. And if you're a new company, it's a 1 in 25 shot of closing them, no matter how excited they seem to be in your first meeting. So if you want to make a sale, you have got to have 25 discussions going on to get that first sale. And it's actually 25 to 1 means you've got a really good salesperson and in a startup. 10 to 1 is typical for a sales professional in an established company. 25 to 1 is if you've got a good sales guy working in the startup. Could be 50 to 1 if you're doing it on your own. Those are scary numbers, because think about that. You've had 24 people say no to you to get the one person to say yes. And if you don't have a funnel that's taking you through those steps, it's going to be very difficult. And one of the other things that's also really important is to know that you need specific material. It's also it's not just to manage the customer time, but it's to manage your time. If somebody's only a prospect, don't put the time into a quote. If you've got to do a custom quote and you're going to run around and figure out pricing and do a lot of work for them, you shouldn't do that until you've taken them through the funnel a bit and that you feel that they're further down and that they're qualified in terms of what because you're going to waste a lot of time. in terms of getting that. You need to make a lot of phone calls, you need to send them spec sheets, you need to get information from them before you invest the hours that are required in doing the quote. I mean, if it's a simpler product, odds are you've got standard offers that they're going through. But in early stages, especially when you're looking for those first pilot customers, it's really important to know where to spend your time. And the only way you can do that is by having a bunch of things underway and comparing the level of interest for them. If you're pinging them every 10 days and they're not responding and they're taking their time, or else they're sending a little note, say, sorry, I haven't gotten to you yet, then you're not on their priority list. And the odds of getting down that funnel are really low. It doesn't matter that they're related to you or that, because the company is just not. One of the things that's really, and I added this is different from my presentation from last year, is I added this slide in, because I really believe that in any startup, that social media needs to be your BFF, which is a term I hate, but it just seemed really appropriate for this conversation because it got the point across. You need to own the channel. You need to own all the channels. You need to own LinkedIn. There is no better way of doing cold calling than through LinkedIn. Mars just actually partnered with LinkedIn and released a social media in your business thought leadership piece with a bunch of videos showing, and there's 3 or 4 startups in there that are actually talking about how they use social media to generate real business, generate thought leadership, get the right talent in, and you really need to look at it. I always look at it as the new cold call. There's nothing I hated worse than having to call a person I'd never met, just cold out of the blue, or have to send them an email and know it was going to go in there, you know, and sit over here, and maybe if I said the right word, I get them interested in it. And yeah, you got to do cold calling and selling. Social media kind of takes some of that away because of the network effect that exists and the ability to do it. Actively maintaining a good LinkedIn profile, actively mining LinkedIn, following the right channels on Twitter to see who's talking about what, finding what channels that they're talking about. These are very, very important pieces for you to follow. It's important to establish yourself in those mediums, your company in those mediums. The people who are using them well are people who have actually got a company-wide approach to social media in terms of how they're doing it. One of the things as well is, in a lot of the spaces that I see a lot of innovation happening in, there's a lot of thought leadership that occurs over social media in terms of generating a brand for yourself. And that often gets you partway down the funnel just on your brand alone if you've done proper thought leadership through the entire channel. Because what it does is you become qualified in their mind because they've been hearing about you, they've been hearing what other people are saying about you. And you got to remember, sales is a people process. People buy from people. And even online selling, even with some of the online tools, the personalities behind them usually drive a lot of incremental sales for you in the short term. It's usually what you get started on. And so that's something that is really important to be able to do. Web-based selling. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Suffice it to say that same odds. In fact, it's a little worse odds if you're online selling in terms of what you need to be able to do. You just need to use different tactics. It's a funnel you need to look at, the clicks on your website, how many visits you get, how you translate them into action, how you bring them in, how you do registration is all incredibly important as part of that process. This could be a whole best practice on its own. And I think Nate is going to talk a little bit in consumer selling, how you do some of those tactics to drive you to action so that they click on that buy button on your website. But there are very specific tactics that you need to do and you got to be really cognizant of the user experience and how far down they get and how you are able to answer their questions. Just like you have to be able to gauge somebody in person, online you have to have created a user experience enough that actually follows your customer's thought process so that as they're thinking through the product, they're able to find the information on your website and get to it in an efficient manner. So this is a really important part. How many are working on solution type products or complicated products that probably require you to be face-to-face. So this is this map is for you. This is where you're selling into a customer, where you actually have an economic person, usually the CFO, could be the budget owner. You actually have the person who's going to use the product, because oftentimes in a complex sale, the person who's buying the CRM system isn't actually the employees who are using it. It's usually somebody in finance or somebody in IT or a group of people that have been put together. A technical buyer. This is, everybody says, oh, it's the worst nightmare is when you get put into the IT shop, especially if you're a SaaS product, because of the questions and things that you get put into answering and the way you need to interact. And then you always will find a coach. The coach could be technical, could be a key user, could be somebody you know inside the organization that will help you manage between these. And so what's really important that you have to do is you have to actually write this down. Find out who they are, and then actively work all of them. And you have to create, you heard Debbie talk about the win-to-win earlier, you have to make sure that you're answering all of their questions and that you're making sure that you don't, the worst situation that you're going to get into is if one of them really doesn't want you at all, or they have another favorite. Oftentimes it's the technical buyer, that they have a different favor that they're looking at, but the user is pushing this on. So you don't want to get caught in those triangles. So it's going to be really important to make sure you manage all 4 of these types of relationships in any solution sale you're doing. Deal structures. I have lots of questions on deal structures. It would be nice if it was a simple, purchased offer, acceptance, and you sign it. But there's all kinds of different ways we're doing sales nowadays, especially with the SaaS model, because you're licensing software, you're selling it through partners, you're having different people use it. Sometimes you have a pilot, they want to try it first, and how you go from pilot to license afterwards. And what you do in each one of these will really depend on the stage that your company's at. If you see the 3 words reference, revenue, margin in terms of what you're looking at, what you do, the typical way that you have to think of selling in your startup is your first sales. I can't tell you how many, depends on how complicated and how much your sale is worth. If it's a really complicated, it could be your first 2. If it's a really simple, you could need 100 of them, depending on what it is. You call them your reference sales. It's the sales you're going to get that give you credibility, that prove the market demand for what you're selling them. And oftentimes, you're going to give them a massive price break. These ones are not being sold for revenue perspective. They're being sold to be reference customers in. What you want from them in return for giving them the price break is you want their feedback, you want to use them as references. So nothing's free. So when people want to try it, you have to make sure that you tell them the value I want from you, and you have to put that in your contract, is that you're going to be a reference for me when this is successful. And that's the way you get the win-win, and that's the win on your side. From there you go, after you go reference, you go to start getting revenue. At that point, you're trying to figure out exactly what your price should be and what the market is really responding to you. And you're actually trying to do the mass sales to get as much revenue in the door as you can, because that means that you're successful. And once you know that, then you can start doing margin. You can start to sell, you know what your price point is, and you can start to figure out how to add profit. Because the thing that's really important to remember is that you price to market and you cost to profit. It's not cost plus pricing. You got to remember that the market's going to tell you how much they're willing to pay for your product, and you have to experiment with that. And then if you, as a business owner, can figure out how to offer that product that they want at a cost that gives you a profit, that's when you know you have a successful business. And it's a really simple phrase, but it's ones that you have to remember. You price to market and you cost to profit. And it's okay if the cost to profit comes 18 months into the cycle, because that's where you get your validation. This is really important, the 10-3-1 rule. I actually contemplated changing it. I mean, it's a common rule, 10-3-1. I was actually going to put the 25-3-1 up for startups. Every 10 cold calls, you might get 3 presentations, and you might make 1 sale. Think about how many no's that is. That's a lot. You have to have thick skin to be a good salesperson. right? In terms of being able to be able to face rejection. So it's not only facing rejection. What I find really amazing about sales is how many times you have to tell the same story. I don't know if any of you are like me and have a short attention span. I find that it's, and this is death to a startup. ADD in sales is death to a startup. And that's what people do, is they tend to jump around and they go after different markets and they don't stay focused because they've done that in their mind. They've already analyzed that market and they've moved on. You've got to be able to stay the course and take it through to conclusion and sell it 25 times before you make one sale and say the same story and get yourself. I'm not going to spend much time on this. Value proposition is everything. I don't know if you guys have heard, this is an old story, the Stanley Works consultant who, when they were selling drills, they had owned the big drill market, and they were trying to go mass in terms of getting it to everybody's homes, and they realized that no women were buying the drills because they were all selling the big drills and all the features of the drills, as opposed to, do you need to hang a picture? Do you need to put up a light switch? Do you need to put up a light? And when they started selling that, all of a sudden women were going and buying the drills. Because they needed to do that. They didn't know that they needed this other big complicated product, but they did need to sell. They did need to do a drill. Sales pitch. The sales pitch is not about you. It's not about you. It's not about your product. It's about the customer you're selling to. What's in it for them? How much time do they have? Who are they bringing? It's all about them, and you've got to make sure that you tailor it for them. It's a really important piece. You're gonna get these slides after, because I'm running over my time to make sure that Nate has a lot of time to talk about B2C sales. These are the 10 essential slides. You put them. One of the important things about pitching is every pitch is different. The slides might be the same. Hopefully you change it for the one that's about the customer, because you should have a slide that's just about the customer and what their needs are and what research you've done and what you think they want to hear. But it's the way the pitch continues that is very different, because of the nature of the people in it. And it's really important when you're in a sales pitch that you remember it's not a debate. I remember I ran a large engineering group for a big communications company, and the worst, and so I had all the vendors, the Ciscos and the Microsofts and the Ericssons and everybody pitching to me. And the ones I hated the worst was when they came in and they argued with me over what my strategy was. I used to be like, seriously? Seriously? And you got to remember that. And the other thing that used to drive me crazy is the whole thing on honesty. If your product's not ready, or a feature's not ready, tell them. Honesty is the only policy. It's no point in saying, yeah, I can have that ready, when really you can't. You know what I mean, in terms of what it does. There's ways to deal with it, but honesty is really the only policy. We talked about this. It's a people process. If you're not a people person, get out of sales. It's a people process. You need to be comfortable talking to people. You need to take a lot of crap. As a salesperson, you're going to smile a lot. You're going to say there's people going to say things to you that just drives you insane, but it's a people process. And don't go cold. Don't go into it never having looked at the deck. Don't go into it not having done your homework. Don't go into it without practicing what kind of questions you're going to get, what you think is going to be the obstacles, knowing who the incumbent is, knowing who the players are, and practice. Here we run extensive pitch preparation sessions, and what's really interesting to me is that everybody comes to us for investor pitch prep, and they're willing to practice the investor pitch prep. And when I say to them, what about your sales pitch? They look at me, you'll do sales pitch prep? Like, it's as important. And having people listen to your sales pitch and ask questions and make sure that you're clear is as important as your investor pitch. And just remember, it's not the same. Do not use an investor pitch with a client, ever. That's a really, really bad mistake. Don't use an investor pitch with a client. I've seen lots of people do that. Last thing, I can't say this enough, you really, really need to, in your sales meetings, listen as much as you talk. It's really, it's amazing, and I mean really listen, because it's amazing what you'll pick up. Sometimes you'll even pick up that you've made the sale so that you can move to close. Like it's amazing how many people miss that in terms of stop selling. You know, sometimes just listening to know that you've made the deal where you can say, all right, can I send you the contract? And sometimes, like I've actually seen people make the sale, keep talking, and talk themselves out of the sale because they convinced the person that they need a bigger deal with you. Right? And then there's like, no, now all of a sudden they want to involve the strategy person and somebody else because they know that the deal is bigger than what they're just this one thing. Take the one thing. Take the one thing, get the revenue, have them paying you before you go for the big one. So listening is the only way you're going to hear those signals coming because it is the most important piece. With that, I could go on forever on some of the things that have to do with selling. I took out of the presentation this year a lot of the soft skills around what you should do in a presentation, but they are on last year's presentation on the web if you want to see it. Okay, great. Nathan, B2C. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for coming. It's a great night, so I know that I'm the only one that stands between you and a great evening outside. See a lot of clients here, so that's awesome. I'm so glad you guys made it. Yeah, so this is my rap sheet. I'm here at Mars because I have a true passion for entrepreneurialism. I'm here because I love working with smaller companies before bureaucracy takes over. And I've done my time at Yahoo, Ogilvy, and a couple of other publishers in the space. So my presentation today is all about, So my presentation is all about how do we break through the noise? We're bombarded with thousands of messages a month, hundreds a day. Making a choice last night at Shoppers for toothpaste was like, I can't explain it. I spent like 10 minutes in this confused daze staring at the shelves, much like this supermarket here you see behind me. So to me, from what I've learned over the last 10 years, and take it for what it's worth, to me it's really about positioning. And how many have read Al Reese's book on positioning, The Battle for the Mind? If you haven't, pick it up. It's pretty cool. I think it's $8 on Kindle or digital copy, or you can purchase it on Amazon or Chapters. And positioning is not what you do to a product. Positioning is what you do to the mind of the prospect. That is, you position the product in the mind of the prospect. It's been proven that we can only handle up to 7 messages at a time. Can you imagine how difficult it is to reach that mind space in a consumer? We have very limited time, we have very limited bandwidth in the mind of the consumer to position a product. So it's a really important statement to me, and something that I always start with clients is, what is your positioning statement? Rather than what is your elevator pitch, tell me about your product and what is the positioning statement? What makes you different? So when we talk about consumer sales, and a lot of this will be familiar for those of you who are further along the marketing, have further along the marketing background or have experience in marketing. But really what you should start with are these 5 steps, and that is, understand your product. What is your unique selling proposition? Have you validated it? This is really important, especially in the startup scene. How many of you are a part of a startup or are considering a startup? Can you just raise your hand? See, pretty much everybody in the room. So you have to validate that with users. And you can do that through lean methodology. There's a great book called Running Lean. It was written by Ash Mora. If you haven't picked that up, pick it up. Or contact me at mars@nmonk@marsdd.com, and I can forward you a PDF copy of it. Second, understand your market. Where are you selling to? and validate that. Understand your target. Who are you selling to? Understand timing. So when are you going to reach them? And then, of course, tactics and how you're going to validate it. And I'll get into a lot about tactics. So first, defining the product, you really have to have a unique value proposition that helps you position the market in the marketplace. And that's a single, clear, and compelling message that states why you're different and worth buying. So what makes you, if you think about this, different than anybody else in the room? What makes your product different or your service different? This is the cornerstone, I think, of positioning yourself. The next thing you have to think about, 5 things actually, is features. What are the features of your product? And I see a lot of passion in my clients' eyes in terms of the features of their product. But you've really got to focus on the most important or the most valuable features of the product. And you can do that again through user testing and so forth. Feature creep is a habit in the startup scene. So you really have to focus on those most valuable features. So pick what makes it different also to the target. And what makes it different to the competitors. Oftentimes, competition is not what you think it is, it's what your customers think it is. So let them define it for you. Pick the greatest solution to the problems they have. So does your startup or your product or service is it a major solution to a problem? How big is the problem? Test both the problem and the solution. And build a backstory. So what makes the product magnetic? And really test that as well to figure out how you can make it different in terms of features and benefits for the user. And of course, validate, validate, validate. I'm very much a lean proponent, so whenever we work with clients in the ICE practice, it's always from a lean methodology, which is constant iteration of your product. Next, we're going to talk about market. So where? And so your objective as an entrepreneur of a product or service is to find a big enough market you can reach with customers who need your product that will pay a price you can build a business around. That's critical. A lot of times we see clients come in that have picked a market that's not really growing, it's stagnating, or it is saturated with competitors, so it makes positioning a little bit more difficult. So really that's the idea of research, is to pick out the key markets and look at their growth on an annual basis or what have you, and we can help you through that, of course. So find the customer segment with the biggest pain, the ease of reach, so find the quickest path to customers. Sometimes it's through a partner, a pilot program in a small target market, etc. Price, pick a customer segment that allows you to maximize on price. Start in smaller markets and go large. A lot of times we have clients that want to just launch across Canada, but oftentimes you can test your product or your service in a local market like Hamilton or Newmarket or Mississauga or what have you. It's easy. In terms of validating, I really like Sean Ellis's stuff. He writes a blog called Startup Market Lessons Learned, I believe. And he's also quoted in Running Lean. But he determines product market fit as 40% of your users returning on a monthly basis. So if you do have a web product or a mobile app product where engagement is important, 40% of your users are returning on a monthly basis. That's pretty cool. It means that you've got a product market fit. The same goes for the test. So in his testing, you can ask a series of questions, but the one question that really stands out in terms of how do you validate your market is if more than 40% of your users to your product or service are very disappointed that they can't have it, then chances are that you're in the right market. And then, of course, you know you've validated your market when you can get paid for it. And Krista was talking a bit about how you do that. And with pricing and so on, you can test that as well with a smaller user group. And we recommend testing pricing right off the bat. So you can have a freemium model if it's an online or mobile product, and timestamp it so you can measure the metrics over a month or a quarter and just test pricing over that period of time. Next is target who. So similar to finding a market, you want to find the customer segment with the biggest pain in that market, quickest path to them, the price that's sustainable, and you want to test with that user group. And you can do that numerous ways. Again, Running Lean has a great resource in terms of testing questions, how to validate it, how to build a beta, an alpha beta, and then an MVP. And that's incredibly important because you need to understand what are their pain points. And one lesson I think we learned in Startup Book Club when we read Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma was oftentimes it's observing customers rather than listening. So you can find that way to observe them interacting with your product or service. You'll get a lot more information out of that in addition to testing through questions. Timing. So 5 things that you need to consider during timing. For timing is budget and tactics. A lot of startups don't have the funding to do the spot on the national or the Super Bowl commercial. You have to figure in budget and timing, of course. What stage is your product or service at? Is it early? Is it late? Are you targeting an early adopter or late adopter? Does that affect timing? When and where are they most receptive? And is there any event that you can tie your marketing message around? A lot of times startups will tie them around key events like Demo Camp, South by Southwest, which is happening in Austin, some of the New York events. There's lots of events, not necessarily those larger events, but also community events that you can attach yourselves to get the word out, and that's a lot low cost. And of course, competitors. So what have your competitors done over the last year? When have they launched products or services? Learn from them, of course. So some tactics that you can use from a digital selling perspective is online. Display, SEM, SEO, that's search engine marketing or search engine optimization, and video, mobile, email, print, out of home, TV, events and PR. The list is really endless, and we could do an hour session probably on each one of those. But I'll take some time to focus on those 8 just briefly. So before you even start, the IAB Canada has some amazing resources that you can check out if you are online digital selling or using online digital selling as a channel. And they have QUAP ad standards, which is amazing. You just go onto their site, you can download it, you can figure out exactly what ad units are most popular in Canada and use them and build them with your designer relatively cheaply. Sign up for eMarketer and Mobile Marketer if you haven't. They have amazing resources in terms of an e-newsletter in both eMarketer and Mobile Marketer. Start with a 1-page marketing plan, which we'll show you in a second. Define your metrics. There's a really great resource called Pirate Metrics for Startups. It was written by Dave McClure. Check it out. It's called R, acquisition, retention, are some of the metrics in there, but he's written a really great piece on how to look at metrics. Check out marketing optimization software as well, like G-Shift Labs, who is a client of Mars and works in the SEO space to raise your search results when people search for your site or product. Contact ad networks. There's All of Media here in Toronto. There's AdMob for mobile devices. And ad networks offer low-cost forms of inventory that you might want to look at. The Startup Marketing blog by Sean Ellis is another really great resource for you. And of course, Positioning, which I already mentioned, by Al Reese. It's a little dated in terms of when it was written, but it provides a great really good fundamentals in marketing if you don't have that already. So online, the things that we need to know about online display, SEM, and video is that it can be very cost effective, highly targeted. You can target time of day. You can target user groups. It's priced by a cost per thousand or cost per click. Cost per thousand really is, you would engage in a campaign for cost per thousand if you're looking for broad reach, broad awareness. If you want more of a direct sale, you would go with cost per click based programs. You can have ad units easily built relatively cheaply in Elance.com, Dribble, that's with 3 Bs, or independent designers. You don't need to go to Ogilvy One or some of the larger agencies to have ad units built. You can do it relatively cheaply. You can also find the sites to advertise on at Alexa.com. And Alexa.com is amazing because what it does is it provides you the demographics of sites within Canada, US, or international, and will also give you that result by category. So if you have a very specific targeted category that you want to reach, Alexa.com is great for that. And of course, IAB.net, which is the US accompaniment of IAB Canada, who also does a lot of research and work with ad units and so on. If you haven't already, check out the SEM tips on Google. So at the bottom of google.ca, you'll see advertising programs. Click on that and go to their AdWords program where you will see exactly what you need to do to purchase and target on Google SEM, which is another incredible tool because it allows you to bid on clicks. And that's really great because you can target right down to keyword. So if you're selling RRSPs, you can bid on that word and have folks be redirected to your site, which is pretty cool. Mobile. So probably one of the most underutilized mediums, I feel anyway, in Canada is mobile. There's a lot of inventory to be had out there if you need to raise awareness or drive conversion for your product or service. It can be highly effective. eMarketer reports it currently has the highest click-through rates, or CTR, in terms of its ability to immediately drive users to your site, your mobile optimized site, across tablet or smartphone or website. And so you can reach them across mediums. It's easier to form partnerships with mobile apps and app developers. And I really believe you need to have a mobile strategy. A lot of startups will come in, and it's great that they've got the online strategy down pat, but a mobile strategy is critical in your technology timeline if you are building that out. And we can help you with that, of course. AdMob is amazing. Check it out, admob.com. For more information on how you target across those different mobile devices. And you can see by the image below, you can be across tablet, iPhone, BlackBerry, Windows 7, etc. So it's a really personal medium for you to reach users, and it's highly effective. Email marketing, which is one of my favorites, is a great way to reach users. ROI can be tracked. You can obtain feedback and test your product through email marketing. And it's a way to promote across properties like Facebook, Twitter, and your blog. So email, to me, is probably one of the most important tactics because it's also low cost. And you can go to sites like MailChimp and have it distributed on behalf of your company. You just have your value proposition, of course, what your messaging is. And you can actually enlist in campaigns through MailChimp to distribute to your clients or your customers. And within that email, you always want to cross-promote other social media. So your Facebook page or group, your Twitter ID, your LinkedIn account, etc. Another kind of blue ocean is LinkedIn right now. We've had a lot of clients that are having success out of LinkedIn as a email marketing tool. It's amazing, so check that out as well. Traditional media. So 5 things to know about traditional media is it can be very, very expensive unless you're getting on the TV through PR, which we'll talk about in a bit. You are reaching, however, a lot more folks through those mediums. It's great for brand awareness. It can be very costly to produce a 15 or 30-second spot for TV, as you probably already know. It cannot be tracked easily unless you're tracking through Nielsen ratings. But it does build brand awareness. So check out those options. There's print, of course. There's out of home. There's TV. You can find all the information you need about those mediums at the Canadian Marketing Association, and I encourage you to join the LinkedIn groups for Canadian Marketing Association. You'll find publishers that are selling out inventory and the benefits and costs to doing each of those mediums. Events and PR. So the 5 things to know about events and PR are, of course, it's low cost, it's high impact for startups, it can be highly targeted and effective, allows you to build a relationship with media, can be tracked with metrics. And when I say metrics, if you haven't heard of Kissmetrics or getclicky.com, check those 2 sites out because they're amazing in terms of the depth of metric that you will get on where the users come to visit your app or website, how much time they've spent there, where else have they gone within your site or your app. So it's great for that if you have a digital extension to your product or service. And it also provides credibility and awareness. And the first thing I would do is build that list of key events based in the market you've defined. Build a list of those key bloggers or key opinion leaders, whether it's journalists or publishers that you need to reach, and pick a time to reach them. Have your positioning statement or your unique selling proposition ready and reach them, because it's all about building a relationship. We've had clients that have constantly contacted the same journalists and actually did get through after a few different contacts. So it is important to kind of continue to keep your message unique, but also to build that relationship with these folks, because PR is very low cost. BNN is a great resource. If you submit to the pitch, you might get called up for that. And so it's really great to have your positioning statement ready for that. There's lots of other events that you might want to take part in. So the next tactic is social media and word of mouth. Social media is the most popular consumer activity now, according to Nielsen. It allows you to connect, engage, and build relationships across media. It's low cost. It's a great way to get socially endorsed. If you get picked up by a Tech Vibes or a TechCrunch or a Globe and Mail blog, it's a really great way to get endorsed, relatively low cost. And so check out HubSpot or the TechCrunch article, which is a very detailed article on social proofing your product or service for new marketing. It's a great article. And start thinking about how you're going to integrate social media into your marketing and selling, because it's critical. And a lot of folks get kind of concerned about the time it's going to take. How do I manage the message? You can start slow. You can start small. Start with a small social network. Carve out some time in the day to cultivate that. It's kind of like a farmer in a field. I take an hour each morning just to spend on Twitter and make sure that I'm getting the word out to folks like you about different events in the startup scene. So it's a great way to get the word out. Next, I think, and last, you're ready to kind of build that one-page marketing document. And this is really all you need. You don't need 50 pages of marketing tactics that no one's going to read. It's really just one page so you can get straight in your mind. What are your objectives? Is it a launch objective? Is it to sustain a message about your product or service? What are the flights? So flights meaning timing. What tactics are you going to use? Video, social media, online, based on the tactics we've reviewed? And what are your key messages? So once you have all of that lined up and you're targeting a specific audience with those tactics, it's going to be great for your product or service. And that's it. So you can hear more from me by following me at Cowboy Tweets. I've got my blog. You can reach me at LinkedIn. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you if you need any help in marketing. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathan. So I'll have you stay there, and we'll bring Krista back up. And if there's any questions from the audience, if you want to direct your questions to either Krista for B2B or Nathan for B2C.
Sure, yeah. Thanks.
Hi there. Hi. I just wanted you to go back to the last slide, possibly, and just
Yes.
explain what that said, because on the side you can't really read what is it used for.
Sure. This one? Great. Yeah, this is a one-page marketing plan, so you can do it in Excel or Word. And so have your, the name of your company, the product or service you want to sell at the top, the audience you want to reach. So in this case, we launched Mars Commons, which is Suite 230 on the second floor. And so you have your industry as the audience, investors, but you can have many different audiences for your product depending on which company and which audience you're targeting. A description of the product or service, the objectives. So is it a raise awareness, launch the product? Is it conversion? You have to really define the objectives. If it's a startup that's just launching, a lot of times it's acquiring new users. If it's a later stage startup, it's creating engagement with existing users. So you have to define the objective based on where you're at, early or later stage. Location, so again, what markets are you targeting? Where are they located? And how are you going to reach them through those two audiences? And then key metrics, flights. Flights is really timing. So what times would you like to flight your campaign? Is it a week? Is it a month? A quarter? How long will the budget last? And then key tactics, so video, online, social media, TV, print, out of home. And then you define those. So which media, which sites within online, which partners are you going to partner with, which events are you going to target. And to me, it's a great one-page kind of summary once you're done and it's complete of a great marketing plan. And don't let budget confine you in the first go-around. Do your optimal marketing plan first, and then go back once you determine how many dollars you have, and revise it so that you can also have two. So you have the optimum go-to-market, and then you also have a on-budget marketing plan as well.
Nathan, Krista mentioned a couple things that she sees that are mistakes in B2B, such as people having sort of sales ADD and changing markets and not focusing and things like that, or giving the wrong pitch and not adjusting their investor pitch to customers. What have you seen in sort of B2C sales? What are some big mistakes that startups make?
Well, first of all, I think I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. I probably made a lot of mistakes in that presentation, but anyway. I think you learn by your mistakes, and mistakes in the startup world we call experience. But some of the biggest mistakes are starting with your product. Like, it's the first mistake I see is, what is the positioning statement? What makes your product or service different? And can you define that? What is the consumer thinking? Have you tested it? A lot of times we'll ask that question with clients. Have you actually validated this with a customer? Who are your competitors? Oftentimes they'll think it's who they think it is, but it's really who the customer thinks it is. And so have they validated that? So we always are asking for validation and proof of that. And if they haven't, then they go out and try it and test it. Marketing is a lot about testing, really.
But I think one of the biggest mistakes that we see in B2C companies is to actually not do a detailed plan and to make a conscious choice. There's a really funny but really inappropriate startup video that's out there that talks about, when somebody says, how are you going to launch your product? And they say, well, I'm going to get covered on TechCrunch and then it's going to go viral. That is the assumption that you don't have to do anything if you're selling it online is one of the biggest mistakes that companies make. Because that, for that to happen is a 1 in a million chance. And you need to really plan and have done a lot of legwork and to cover it and to make sure that you're ready for what you want to do and to actually support that. So it's that we see a lot of mistakes with people. They just, when you ask them what they've done, because they're frustrated that they're not making sales, it's, well, they haven't actually done anything. They went out there, they posted it, they sent some tweets, but they don't have any followers, and it's really getting that plan to generate that demand. That is the chart that you couldn't read. That was really the important thing, is to figure out what it is that you're going to do.
Okay. A question for Krista and one for Nathan. First, Krista, if a pitch is a dialogue, not a debate, and you say an investor pitch is not the same as a sales pitch, knowing that every pitch is going to be different, the key differences between an investor and a sales pitch from your perspective?
Well, number one, you include your financials in an investor pitch, and you don't in a customer pitch.
Okay.
An investor pitch is all about you, and a customer pitch is all about them. That's the huge difference. You're talking about your product, you're talking about markets in general, you're talking about size of market in an investor pitch. Really, in a customer pitch, you're just talking about them. You're talking about what's in it for them at that moment, not the fact that they're one of a big market for you. So that's the big difference to me. And I actually have a slide that I use that I compare the 10 essential slides for an investor deck and the 10 essential slides for a customer pitch, and they're very different. Because it's one, you're selling your company and you, and the other, and who your customers are, and the other one, you're trying to get one.
And for Nathan, I'm glad that I don't think of myself as a Luddite, but I was fine until I got to the print and TV slide, and then I'm looking at O, and I'm going, what the heck is that? So if you can explain to me what OOO is about.
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
No, it's
Wonderful,
just-
great.
No, it's out of home. So out of home advertising can be a billboard. It can be the screen you see in the elevator. It can be the new signs that you see in the side of the street. It can be the sign that you're seeing when you're staring back at you from the urinal in some club. Know that from
The
experience.
billboards on the highway.
Yeah, out of home.
Great, thanks.
I just wanted to add a comment to Krista's answer. I think about the customer pitch. It sounds so simple to talk, when you do your pitch, to talk about the customer and their needs, but you'd be really surprised how many people don't do it. Like just throughout my career, when we've worked with contractors or different people, they haven't done any research before meeting with you, and they don't ask the right questions. And you see it in interviews too. When you're interviewing people for jobs, they don't know anything about your company. They haven't done their homework. So you'd be surprised how much you can stand out by actually doing your homework on who you're trying to sell to.
I was just wondering, in the tech sphere, if you know that you're going to be depending on institutional partners, for example, how important is it to go in with some kind of finished product or a beta version when you know that it'd be much better to develop it once you're partnered with them? But does that make a difference if you have an actual product to show them and test with them, or not?
So that's a situational answer. There is no, for me to tell you, yes, you need a developed product, or no, you don't, I think would be giving you false advice. I think that's one of the ones where you need to talk to somebody, because it depends on who the partner is, and it depends on what you want from them. I know it feels like a bit of a cop-out of an answer, but it really is the right answer, is it depends. It depends on who the partner is, it depends on what the product is, and it depends upon the nature of the partnership that you want to involve with them. So it really depends.
Good enough. Thanks.
We have a question from Nawar on the webcast. He asks, how do I make sure I hire the perfect sales/marketing people, keeping in mind that my product is B2B? So what should a startup look for when hiring the first salesperson?
Previous experience. And it's really important that you do reference checks on them to make sure that that the experience that they're telling you they have is the right experience. When you're hiring somebody in, you want experience in the industry that you want them to come with connections, you want them to come with knowledge of the industry, because you're going to have to train them on your product. So you don't want to train them on your product as well as on the industry and what they're coming from. So it's really important that you are clear on what you're looking for, and then you do reference checks. Because you got to remember, salespeople are good talkers. Good and bad salespeople are good talkers, because that usually gets you in the door. And so the difference between a really good salesperson and a bad salesperson is not whether they're good talkers, it's do they know how to close. And you're only going to find that out by talking to people that they've worked for, or that they've sold to, or that they, and usually good salespeople have good references because they know how to sell themselves as well, and they know that that's important.
I think another thing I'd like to add to Krista's comments is what kind of sales were they doing before? Because in big companies, often there's the hunters versus the farmers. So you've got the people that are actually out there pounding the pavement, doing the cold calls, and finding new prospects. And there's those that just sort of keep the prospects that have been already brought in and look after those. And for a new product and a new market, you really need a hunter, not a farmer.
It also helps to have a coach within that company. If you know somebody that's worked with that company before, connect through LinkedIn, through an event, etc. It's really great to have a coach that knows the mindset of the buyer and who can make the buying decision. On the other side of that, when you are in that face-to-face meeting, it's really important to be authentic. How many of us have been in a restaurant or wherever, and you just get an automated sort of response back from the person? So you really got to be authentic, really connect with them, learn about their business, learn about them. Some of the most successful sales presentations I've been in have been ones where you've built this relationship, you're providing research. It's not just about closing the sale right away. It's also about building that relationship, especially if it's a large sale. And so if it's providing a white paper, or did you see this article, or anything you can do to build that connection is critical.
Jackie?
Oh, hi, Krista and Nathan. Both of you did a wonderful job, and I have a question for each of you. For Nathan, to start with, you did a wonderful job in summarizing a lot of things that we actually read. Specific question on the 5 steps to start breaking through the noise with Ash Murrow. So you talk about starting with the product and then the market and then the target customer. I'm just wrestling in my mind. Maybe I got intoxicated by this customer development approach. Aren't we starting with the customer and the customer's problem first?
Yes, it's always well, it's starting with their problem, but you have to understand your positioning for that problem. You have to understand the product when it comes to marketing.
And I think it's really important. The lean startup model that talks about customer development, and you do problem interviews and then you do solution interviews, and not every startup is that's when you're trying to come up with the idea. Sometimes a startup is created because somebody has developed a really interesting piece of technology or a device, or come up with something in the technical front. And then what you're supposed to do in those problem interviews then is it's a little bit more focused around figuring out where best to focus the technology. So it's important to remember what your startup is when you're looking at these different methodologies, because it is, we hear a lot about that do the problem interviews, find out before you start your technology. But there is a lot of really deep IP that's being created by people, good engineers and good computer scientists. And it's important that there are great ways to figure out how to suit those technologies to problems that exist that are different than if you're just kind of working in a general area. So it's important to fine tune depending on what your personal situation is, whether you have a technology or whether you're coming at it and you're developing a technology for a problem.
Okay, got you. And my next question is, in the situation of B to B to C sale, how do I integrate the best of both worlds?
So if it's a B2B to C sale, you got to remember that that means you're doing B2B, but you're selling it to somebody who's going to be responsible for the end user, right? So I just want to clarify that that's what we're talking about. That's what B2B to C means, is that you're selling a product to somebody, but the end user of your product is going to be their user, not the person who's paying for it.
Exactly. How do I use the end users to pull the sale?
Once again, it depends, but it's really important for you to remember when you're building your product that you're building it for the user, but that there are functions that you need for the buyer, right? That's usually reports and analytics and ways of offering it, but the user experience still needs to be built with that end user in mind. So it gives you an added complexity, but even in most B2B, what's really important is even most B2B, direct B2B sales, that there is an end user, which is not always the person who's paying the price. So it's, you know, the IT guy buys the product, but the provisioning department or the salesperson's using it at the company. So in most cases, you got to remember the user experience is different sometimes than the buying or the distributing experience. And you got to take both into account when you're doing your sales pitch as well as when you're doing your product dev.
Thank you. There's a question on the webcast from Rami. It's a question, I guess, on related to Krista's comment, phrase price to market and cost to profit. Rami asks, what are the best strategies for pricing your product besides researching competitors? So we get this a lot. We get the how do I price my products question.
Besides research and competitors?
Besides researching competitors.
Well, the best way is by knowing your customer or who's buying it. So we have a client, and I won't mention names, but they've done the best job I know of pricing a brand new SaaS model. And what they've done is they really understand the economics of their customer. So they figured out from their customer how much they will pay for certain types of things. So you figure out that, you know, if it's a disposable item or if it's something that they use all along. And they also figure out kind of where the budget authority lies. So you want to make sure that you don't need CEO approval to purchase your product if it's not something that is kind of totally strategic for that company to buy. So other than doing competitive research and figuring out what other people are doing, really understanding the budget and buying habits of the company you're saving to. And you can do that through your customer meetings and interviews in terms of what you're talking about. And one of the most important things to remember in pricing is you always start big and negotiate down. Right? It's really hard to increase your price. You know, they think they're getting a deal because they're your first 5 customers and you're discounting down or whatever it needs to be in terms of, or you give them enterprise-wide pricing or volume discounts. There's always ways to come down from a price. It's really hard to go back up when you've left money on the table. Right? And you can judge that, if you're in a dialogue as part of your sales pitch, you can judge their body reaction, their voice reaction to whatever price you put on the table, that you can immediately, but never back away up front, because it's going to be really important to maintain that optimal price point.
This is a question for both of you. What approach would you take, or would you take a different approach to sales, marketing, and validation for products that are completely new? As an example, let's say you were doing sales, marketing, and validation for the very first TV that it was ever built. Would your approach be different?
Absolutely. If you're creating a market, you have to do a lot more thought leadership work. It's a lot harder. So when you're creating a market is much different than if you're selling into an established market that exists. So one of the things that we didn't touch on, which really should have been covered in the marketing session, which is how do you actually create a market? Because it's creating a market is not a sales tactic, it's actually something that occurs before you start selling. That's where your thought leadership creation, where you're looking at how to partner, how you get into trade show. There's a lot of things you need to do from a marketing perspective to establish the new kind of area, and to really, that's where you're really looking at those fast adopters or lead kind of, you know, the quick to ones that want it, and you're really focused on a core group and getting a lot of coverage and doing. We have a couple of clients here that we have one that's in the thought control computing space, and that's creating a market. right? In terms of being able to sell products into that space. So they've done a lot of work on that creating a market, which is not necessarily, I think Nathan was talking a bit where he said whether you're in brand awareness or whether you're actually trying to get to a direct sale, well, you're in the pre-brand awareness, right? Because you're actually in trying to generate that need, and you have to really get at some of that. A lot of people can tell you what they don't want. A lot of people can't tell you what they want. So you're getting at that unrecognized need of a user, which is really, really clever marketing that you have to do.
Yeah, Pinterest, has anybody heard of Pinterest? It just recently launched. They're at 10 million users already. It's incredible. Kind of launched in a similar new market, but it's still in social media on the outer edges of it, kind of down market. But their positioning was really interesting because nobody knew what the heck. If you say the word, what does Pinterest mean? What they were able to do is call themselves the Tumblr of social networks. So Pinterest is really the Tumblr, a social with photo ID. So they were able to tie. So if you can say your likes this, I'm the product or service like this, I'm the Facebook of like this. That helps, especially in the clients that we've seen that are pitching investors to say we're the Google of this or the. So at least they can bridge the gap in the short term, and then you can raise awareness through that and come out with a broader marketing message.
And for validation, would there be a different approach for that as well? Or?
Well,
It's just hard work. There's not much of a different approach on validation. You just got to get out there and getting people to try it.
yeah, and you can do that a number of ways. A lot of startups will do validation through even sites like LaunchRock. They'll have a splash page up. They'll get some way gain the attention of their target audience. It's typically an early adopter. And then through that list or that database, ask questions and validate that way.
And if it's a physical product as opposed to an online one, it's often where you have to get to key opinion leaders and have them to try the product and get them covering it, and you have to start getting it out that way.
Thank you.
We have a really important incoming comment from the webcasters. Melissa H. says, not a question, but a comment. I really love Nathan's shoes.
I'll put them on eBay then or something.
Which is a great startup. They're a Tom. I'm not sure if everybody knows.
Yes.
In terms of what they...
I'm positioning
Tom
myself.
shoes, every time you buy one of those, they buy a pair of shoes. So anyways.
It's
Yeah,
a one-for-one model?
Yeah, they're made from recycled materials, and you buy a pair and they give a pair to
Yes,
somebody.
yeah, they give a pair away.
Yeah, it's great.
Another great site is Warby Parker. If you are wearing eyeglasses or need eyewear, they do an amazing job with the one-for-one model. You can purchase a pair of eyeglasses, now sunglasses as well, and they'll also give a pair away.
Okay, we'll take the last two questions and then we'll wrap it up.
I'm not sure I can top that last comment. But I'm a new business owner, and this question is for both of you. And I'm curious, what questions do I need to have answered about my product before I can legitimately go out and hire my first salesperson?
Wow.
What
Oh,
questions do you need to have answered about your product? Before you hire a salesperson, you need to have somebody pay you for your product. And it can't be related to you.
It's as easy as that?
It's seriously, because you're going to be paying somebody hard cash. So you've got to, there's nobody that can sell your product better at the beginning than you can to those first few, the passion in terms of what you need to do. And so if you look at things and you follow good sales process, you should be able to close those first reference customers. So you want to make sure that somebody's paying you before you start paying somebody else to sell it on your behalf. And so it could simply be, doesn't have to be full price or anything like that, but you need to have that market validation before you buy. The only exception to that is if you really, really, really are uncomfortable selling. Then you need to do it sooner, obviously. So that's a personal thing. I always like, in a startup, I always like you to have some revenue coming in before you start paying pure sales kind of salaries out the door, but the only other time is if I'm working with startups where it's just, you know that they're not the right people to be. They don't know the market that they're in. They don't know how to sell it. They don't know how to get there. So it's a bit of a personal recognition thing about whether or not you can do it, and whether you can, if you wake up and you spend 3 days before you make that call, then you need to hire somebody. You know what I mean? Because you're just elongating your time to revenue. But the best and most ideal time would be after you've got not guarantee, because nothing's guaranteed, but after you have initial market proof. Is that helpful?
I think you said don't hire a salesman until you have validation that the initial idea can sell.
Sort of, yes. It's not as clear cut as that. That's the unfortunate part in all of this is that, and then one thing I want to make sure everybody takes away from this is that, it's really easy to stand up here and give a presentation on sales. It's really hard to do it, and everything is situational, and I want to make sure, we don't know anything about any of the businesses that you're working on. So, at any one point in time, something that we said might not be the exact right answer for the situation that you're in. So I'm really encouraging you to think through it depends is a really important message, right? It really does depend on the situation you're in. It's because sales is a combination of people, product, and market. And so you always have to think of those 3 things before you make your final choices, because it's right in that intersection, and none of those are absolutes.
I have a quick question. As an entrepreneur, how do you find the right product to sell for yourself? Should it go by interest or passion, or?
So you try.
Like, how do you find the right product to sell as an entrepreneur?
So as an entrepreneur, the right product that
for
you
yourself.
want to
Should
build.
it be by passion or your interest, or should it be something like fully different?
Whatever product you're selling, you have to have passion for as an entrepreneur, or you're just going to have a really terrible time. Because being an entrepreneur is hard work, so you better love or have a good you better love the product that you're pitching. How do you find the idea is a very different question.
Like the right product to sell, like that fits in your. Cause there's so many products out there. Like, how do you find the right product that fits with your, like?
So I understand the question. It's just a really hard one to answer. Yeah. It's
So I understand it's supposed to solve problems, right, with your product or service, but then that's the big question, problem I'm having.
The only way we ever know how to tell people how to come up with the idea for their business is to look at your own life and the daily problems that you see, whether it's in business or in something that's a big pain point for you. And then you start to figure out, asking friends and people and acquaintances, whether they have a similar pain point that you have. And then what you try to do is find a solution that solves that pain point and matches between them. But coming up with that idea. Sometimes it comes in different ways. We say, write down, I'm a mentor in the next 36, and that's the first thing. It's a student-based program, and people get put into it, and they get put into teams of 4, and then they have to spend the first 2 months coming up with their idea. So we go through rounds and rounds of exercise in terms of how they come up with their idea. And it usually comes from something that they've been working on, something that they're really interested in, or something that really annoys them in their life that they want to come up with a better way to solve. But really, once you've done that, you've got to look at how it fits into ecosystems in the marketplace, to whether it's something anybody will pay for at some point in time. Because there's lots of things that are annoying, but that people aren't going to pay to fix them. Okay? Hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Krista and Nathan, for a great presentation.
Thanks.